Cross, put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. John Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now. If you're listening on YouTube, we want to get up to 300 likes on this show. And also a programming note, even though we're coming to you today for the first time on CBS Sports Network, which will continue throughout the rest of the 25-26 college basketball season, we will be with you live on YouTube on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the 25-26 college basketball season at 1 o'clock Eastern. So if you can't join us at that time, 1 o'clock Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays, make us part of your afternoon or evening commute or during your early morning commute or early morning workout on both Apple and Spotify. We need an army with us every time we do Inside College Basketball Now, and we want you and urge you to be a part of that army. And as the calendar flips to 2026, obviously the storylines in college basketball continue to be laid out at a premium. And one of the main storylines, obviously, is going to revolve around the best teams in the sport. And that's where we start with three big things. And the first big thing I want to talk about is the two teams that are separating themselves from the rest of college basketball when it comes to overall dominance, and that's Michigan and UConn. And before I get into these two programs, I want to first point out that Arizona is the team that I have voted number one with my AP vote for several weeks, and that Arizona is the team that deserves to be the number one team in college basketball. But if you're looking at sheer dominance, if you are looking at pulverizing opponents and pounding them into submission, the two teams that have been the most impressive this season in college basketball have been Michigan and UConn. And we start with the Wolverines, who have ripped through opponents like a chainsaw through butter after beating Wake Forest and TCU by close margins in November. And coming into today's show, I was thinking about the most dominant teams that we have seen in recent memory. And the two that came to mind are the ones that you obviously saw right there on the graphic. The Kentucky team in 2014-15, that went 38-1 and lost to Wisconsin in the Final Four, and the Gonzaga team in 2021 that lost to Baylor in the national title game. When you look at the average margins of victories for those two teams, Kentucky's in 14-15 was just under 21 points a game. Gonzaga's in 2021 was 22.5 points a game. Entering tonight's game against USC in Ann Arbor, Michigan is beating its opponents by over 30 points per game. There is a lot of season left between now and Selection Sunday, but what Michigan is doing from a dominance perspective, from a historical perspective, is something that deserves all the attention that's been warranted. This is an unselfish team. It's a team that was put together by Dusty May like a crafted composer would obviously sculpt a piece of art. But now you look at the next 8 games for Michigan. USC tonight, which I mentioned, at Penn State, Wisconsin at home, then a trip to the Great Northwest where you're going to get Washington on the road and Oregon on the road. You come home and you have 3 games against Indiana, Ohio State, and Nebraska. Anything can happen in college basketball. It is a sport where the unexpected becomes the ordinary. But with that said, with all those teams, with what we've seen from Michigan, I don't see any of those teams beating the Wolverines and potentially even pushing the Wolverines. And I firmly believe there is a better than likely chance that Michigan will take a perfect 20-0 record into its game at Michigan State in late January. We will get to the Spartans, who are at Nebraska, later in the show. And the one thing I'm curious to see between now and that game, starting with tonight's game against USC in Ann Arbor, will there be a team that is able to put game pressure on Michigan, something we haven't seen in the second half of a game since Michigan went to TCU during the second week of the season? And look, in that second week of the season, Michigan took Wake Forest to the wire. Wake Forest really pushed Michigan in the game in Detroit. TCU did the same thing at Fort Worth. And since that point, Dusty May's team, one that features great balance, one that features great unselfishness, one that features a massive front court with two power forwards, Yaxel Lendeberg, Morez Johnson, and then UCLA transfer Adai Mara in the middle. It features a team, in my opinion, that right now deserves attention, not just for the fact of the way that it's played so far, but because of the fact that Michigan is doing things at a historical rate, beating teams by over 30 points per game. Tonight, USC comes to Ann Arbor. We had Eric Musselman on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he firmly said that he did not want to even watch Michigan film over Christmas because he saw what the Wolverines were doing to opponents. I want to point out as well, USC, a team that has really good personnel, is a team I'm disappointed is not fully healthy because I think USC potentially could have been a second weekend dark horse if the Trojans did not lose Rodney Rice to a season-ending shoulder injury. Elijah Arenas, the talented freshman who's been dealing with a meniscus injury, according to Eric Musselman, is slated to return to the lineup in mid-January. So USC is a good team, but obviously a tall task tonight for the Trojans on the road in Ann Arbor. Now, beyond that, I talked about the other talented team that has been dominating college basketball, and that's the team that won back-to-back national championships in 23 and 24, and that's UConn. And UConn's record is 13-1, but it should be noted that UConn has yet to lose a game this season at full strength. The one loss for the Huskies came at home against Arizona, the team that, again, is deservedly number one in the country, without Tarris Reed and without Braylon Mullins. And UConn so far, and you see the graphic right here, has been dominant. The margin of victory in 3 Big East games is 20 points per game. Look at the sharing of the basketball right there. 60 assists on 92 made field goals. In the win the other day against Xavier, UConn had 26 assists on 33 made field goals. And the makeup of this team, in my opinion, is much different than the two teams that won national titles under Dan Hurley in 23 and 24. In 23, you had the big three. Adama Sanogo, most outstanding player in the Final Four. Andre Jackson, the top utility player in college basketball. Jordan Hawkins, a lottery pick at the 2. And then a lot of great role players around those guys. In 2024, you had one of the great college teams of the modern era, a team that went 37-3. Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer in the backcourt brought 10 years of college experience to the perimeter. Steph Castle was a lottery pick on the wing. Alex Caravan was obviously playing a great role at power forward. And Donovan Clingan was a rim protector at the front of the goal that changed everything when opposing teams were trying to run their offense. This team is different. This team has incredible balance. This team has incredible depth, and I think it's really going to be difficult for opponents to now try and game plan for UConn in the Big East because they don't need to rely on one player to go off and get 20 or 25 to win a game. And I'm starting to see more and more the gap between UConn and the rest of the conference. And look, the last 2 years, we have had the two teams that win the Big East win 18 league games. St. John's last year and UConn in 23-24. I would be shocked if the Huskies win fewer than 18 Big East games this year because of the way the league is structured around them. Now, a big part of that is obviously because of how good UConn is and the balance that it possesses and the depth that it has, especially at point guard with Silas Demery Jr., the transfer from Georgia, and also his backup Malachi Smith. In 3 Big East games, Demery's assist-to-turnover ratio is 26-8. But you look right now at the state of the Big East Conference, and every Friday I do a bracket breakdown of what the NCAA tournament projection would look like, according to me, if Selection Sunday was today. I have 4 Big East teams in as of today. UConn, St. John's, Villanova, and Seton Hall, and Butler is just outside. And Butler has a win over Virginia that's going to travel all the way to Selection Sunday. But I do not know in my heart if any Big East teams other than UConn and St. John's are going to be able to sustain what is needed to make the NCAA tournament in March. We have seen two of the brands that have been at the top of this conference, Marquette and Creighton, really drop off. A credit to Greg McDermott and Creighton. They have won 4 in a row. Marquette is 0-8 against power conference opponents this season. Marquette plays at UConn on Sunday. That is going to be, in my opinion, one of the toughest games that Shaka Smart will have to coach since he's been the head coach of the Golden Eagles. Now, Shaka Smart had an 11-win season when he was at Texas with a really young team. I thought that this would unequivocally be the most difficult task that he had since he was the head coach at Marquette. It may be the most difficult task that he has had since he's become a head coach. And the coach he's going against on Sunday, Dan Hurley at UConn, is obviously going to do something that would put him in a historical light. He's going to win his 3rd national title in 4 years. And if Dan Hurley accomplishes that, he would join the following head coaches who have won 3 or more national championships: Bob Knight, Jim Calhoun, Adolph Rupp, John Wooden, Mike Krzyzewski. And that's what UConn is on a trajectory towards. But you know as well as I do, this is only January. We talked about Michigan, we talked about UConn, but I got to tell you, it has never been more interesting to cover the triangle in college basketball. Big things happening at Duke, big things happening at Carolina, and NC State and Will Wade have a huge game Saturday morning against Virginia. More on that when we return. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, I want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 300 likes on this show. And also a programming note, even though we're coming to you today on CBS Sports Network, which will continue throughout the rest of the 25-26 college basketball season. We will be live on YouTube on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the 25-26 college basketball season at 1 o'clock Eastern. So if you can't be with us then, be sure to subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Make us part of either your morning commute and workout or also your afternoon ride home. And again, a reminder that in addition to those live shows, we are also going to be bringing you additional episodes and exclusive interviews with the biggest and best names in the sport. Now, the second big thing I want to get to today revolves around the interesting storylines that are surrounding Tobacco Road. And obviously, Tobacco Road involves Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. So let's get right now to the Blue Devils, who again are a threat to go far in the NCAA tournament under Jon Scheyer. And the other day against Georgia Tech, Duke made a lineup change. And Jon Scheyer made the decision to insert Caden Boozer, the twin brother of Cameron Boozer, into the Blue Devils starting lineup alongside Caleb Foster in Duke's backcourt and move Isaiah Evans down to the wing. Now, I can tell you, from doing multiple Duke games this season and also being at a Duke practice in the preseason, that the main story and the main questions for Duke entering training camp in September and October were what was going to happen at point guard and what was going to happen on the wing. We've seen throughout the first 2 months of the season Caleb Foster establish himself defensively and also with the knack to make big shots on the offensive end of the floor, as evidenced by the shot he made when Duke won at Michigan State. We have not seen, however, an answer for the Blue Devils on the wing at small forward. Now, Jon Scheyer has tried 3 different players at that spot and give them an opportunity to win that spot. It started with Dame Sarr, it followed up with Nick Kamenya, and it also included Darren Harris, the sharpshooting sophomore. So the move is not a surprising one to me, especially when you consider the conversations that I've had with the Duke coaching staff and how much reverence they have for Caden Boozer's poise. And Caden Boozer played big minutes in that game that Duke played against Texas Tech and lost at Madison Square Garden on December 20th. And he also obviously played big minutes against Georgia Tech. During those two games, Caden Boozer is averaging 13 points per game, and he has an assist-to-turnover ratio of 5-1. This is not a guy that's going to wow you with his athleticism. This is a guy who's a ball mover. This is a guy who's a great blend player. But to me, it also encapsulates how important Isaiah Evans is for the long-term potential of this Duke team. For Duke to go back to a Final Four for the second straight year, Duke is going to need a consistent secondary scoring option to take pressure off Cam Boozer, who is clearly separated himself in the National Player of the Year race. Isaiah Evans is that guy. I know he's been up and down, and obviously he has not been a consistent threat yet for Duke. But for Duke to, again, get to a Final Four, Isaiah Evans has to be a formidable piece. Remember last year, when Tyrese Proctor went out of the lineup for Duke in February, Evans played a major role. And over the last two seasons, when Isaiah Evans scores 15 or more points, Duke is 11-0. Another thing I want to point out about Duke, the road to Selection Sunday is going to be a lot bumpier this year in the ACC. The league, in my opinion, after only getting 4 teams in the NCAA tournament in 2025, has a chance to double its NCAA tournament representation in 26. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm looking at the ACC right now, and I think you are going to see 7, 8, 9 teams vying for NCAA tournament berths. Duke is not too far off track right now in terms of the resume that the Blue Devils have put together, but we have to remember the ACC is going to be much harder to navigate this year than it was last year. That includes 2 games against Louisville in January for the Blue Devils. And it also will include that massive matchup in Washington, D.C. against Michigan in February. Now, another reason why the ACC is vastly improved from last season is because North Carolina is significantly better. And the main reason why North Carolina is significantly better is because Caleb Wilson, to me, you can make an argument for BYU's A.J. DeBansa, who will be on CBS tomorrow afternoon against Kansas State. But Caleb Wilson, to me, is the player. If North Carolina finds a way to march into the top 10 of the polls and continue to climb, Caleb Wilson, to me, is a player that could challenge Cam Boozer in the National Player of the Year race. He is doing things right now that are making him appointment television each time that he steps on the floor. He was unbelievable the other night against Florida State passing the basketball. He's obviously a factor with how accurate he is on offense, with the way he rebounds the ball. And I know he's only been in college basketball 2 months, but I was doing some thinking after the game against Florida State the other night. And I think you can make the case already that Caleb Wilson deserves to be in the conversation among the best front court players that North Carolina's program have had since Tyler Hansborough led the Tar Heels to the national championship in 2009. So you look at some of those players that came through North Carolina up front after Tyler Hansborough. John Henson, Tyler Zeller, Bryce Johnson was unbelievable for North Carolina in 15-16 when the Tar Heels made the national championship game and lost to Villanova on the Chris Jenkins buzzer beater. Obviously, they won a national championship with Kennedy Meeks and Isaiah Hicks in 17. Armando Bacot was a walking double-double. But Wilson, with his ability to affect all these different areas of the box score, with his ability to be ridiculously accurate on offense. He has the ability, and I said this the other day on this show, he has the ability to dominate a game while still being unselfish. Now, with that said, before we look at North Carolina and anointing North Carolina as a bona fide challenger to Duke or even Louisville in the ACC, North Carolina still has some things to work out. The Tar Heels troika of Wilson, Vasar, and Seth Trimble is as good as there is, obviously, in the sport in terms of having your top 3 options. Surrounding that is going to be the big question. There's been a two-headed monster at point guard for North Carolina with Kyan Evans, the Colorado State transfer, who made 5 threes against Florida State earlier in the week, and also Derek Dixon, who had some big moments in the road win against Kentucky. North Carolina has a sneaky tough game on Saturday at SMU. SMU is a program, okay, that is in year 2 in the ACC under Andy Enfield. But SMU, to me, is in that ACC mix to be an NCAA tournament team among the teams that didn't play, obviously, in the NCAA tournament last year. If you haven't followed the Ponies closely, North Carolina is going to encounter one of the more under-the-radar perimeters that we have in Power Conference basketball on Saturday. Boopy Miller, the lead guard for SMU, is an all-ACC first-team caliber player. Jaron Pierre Jr., the Jacksonville State transfer, is a all-ACC caliber player, putting up major numbers for Andy Enfield. And B.J. Edwards, the third player on the perimeter, is a guy that is the only player in college basketball this year to have multiple triple-doubles. North Carolina, Hubert Davis, the Tar Heels have their hands full coming up Saturday afternoon against SMU in Dallas. Now, there's also another big game for teams in the Triangle on Saturday, and that is NC State and Will Wade taking on Virginia. NC State had a funky kind of non-conference schedule because the Wolfpack didn't really help themselves with any major wins, but they also didn't hurt themselves. It's really smart scheduling by Will Wade. Beat a lot of good mid-major teams who are performing well later in the season: Liberty, Boise State, VCU. But NC State needs a signature win. And Virginia is the type of signature win that could obviously translate to a quad 1 victory later in the season. Virginia lost that heartbreaking loss to Virginia Tech in triple overtime the other day, but Virginia is massive and has incredible front court depth with Testa Ritter, Johan Grunlow, also Ugana Onyenso and Devin Tillis up front. It's a dangerous game for NC State on the backboard. And NC State, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this, it needs to get Darian Williams back on track. He has been held to single digits in 4 of his last 5 games, but it also needs great decision-making from Quadir Copeland. Quadir Copeland very, very quietly has become a Swiss Army knife player as we look at obviously some of the production for Darian Williams there for NC State. But Quadir Copeland has become a Swiss Army knife player for Will Wade and NC State, playing at a really, really high level, except for not turning the basketball over. He has not been great in terms of his ball security. But over the last 5 games, Copeland averaging 13 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. And another thing I want to point out, I am always an advocate for more standalone games in college basketball because games feel bigger in our great sport if they're not competing with other big games. NC State and Virginia tip off at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. There's no competition. Nobody else is playing at that time. And I frankly don't understand why more power conferences or even mid-major conferences who need more exposure don't make it a point on Saturday and even Sunday mornings to get into the 11 a.m. Eastern time slot or the 10 a.m. Eastern time slot. There's a lot to get to, and there's obviously a lot happening in the Triangle. But there's also a lot happening in Lincoln, Nebraska. The Huskers are off to their best start in program history, 13-0, and Nebraska will entertain Michigan State tonight at Pinnacle Bank Arena. What's at stake for the Huskers? We break it down when we return. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. We want to get up to 300 likes on this show if you're watching on YouTube. And also I want a reminder from a programming perspective that Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you live on YouTube on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the 25-26 college basketball season at 1 o'clock Eastern. There will also be additional shows right here on CBS Sports Network. But on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, we will be coming to you with live shows. And if you can't join us then, make us part of your morning or afternoon commute on Spotify or Apple. We need an army with us for each and every show on Inside College Basketball Now, and we want you to be all you can be. And again, in addition to the episodes we're going to have on Mondays and Thursdays, we will also be bringing you additional episodes throughout the week with exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. But for now, we continue to set the table and preview the weekend in college basketball. And the third big thing is revolving a game tonight at Pinnacle Bank Arena between Nebraska and Michigan State, which is obviously, to me, the headline game of a great Friday night in college basketball. Nebraska is unequivocally one of the best stories we've seen so far in the 25-26 college basketball season. The 13-0 record for the Huskers is their best in program history. We are seeing right now things done at Nebraska that have never been done before. Remember, Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game in program history. That is the goal for this program this year. But beyond that, Fred Hoiberg and his team deserve respect for not just the fact that it's 13-0, but for the resume that Nebraska is already putting together. Nebraska won a road game already at Illinois. Nebraska has a neutral site win over Oklahoma. Nebraska also won home games in dominant fashion against Creighton, an in-state rival, and Wisconsin. But to me, this game for Nebraska is going to be a sign of whether or not the Huskers are just a feel-good story or a legitimate contender in the Big Ten this season. And with that said, as I am always forecasting at the end of each week's potential brackets for the NCAA tournament, in my bracket today, I had Nebraska as a 4 seed because as of January 2nd, that's what the Huskers warrant. But you have an opportunity now, if you're Fred Hoiberg, to now enter a different type of territory. You have an opportunity to take care of business at home against the Michigan State team that is quietly, in my opinion, overachieving from what we thought the Spartans were going to be coming into the season. Michigan State last year, in my opinion, had one of the best years that it's ever had under Tom Izzo. I know that the Spartans didn't go to the Final Four, and they've won 8 times under Tom Izzo, and they won a national championship in 2000. But Michigan State did not have dominant talent last year, and it won 30 games, won a Big Ten regular season title outright, and went all the way to the Elite Eight, where it lost to Auburn in Atlanta. Over the last 2 years, Tom Izzo has a combined record of 42-8. And I want to point out that even though Michigan State was advancing to the NCAA tournament, it was not always advancing far in the NCAA tournament from 2021 until last year. Michigan State lost in the first 4 to UCLA in 2021. In 2022, Michigan State lost in the round of 32 in a hard-fought game to Duke. Michigan State did go to the Sweet 16 in 2023, but was the winner of a 7-10 game against USC and then upset Marquette in the round of 32. And then obviously in 2024, Michigan State lost a game in the round of 32 to North Carolina, and Tom Izzo defiantly after that game, I remember where I was working the NCAA tournament in Memphis, and I was watching the game because we didn't have on-air responsibilities that day, and he said defiantly, I'm going to make a deeper run in this tournament or I'm going to die trying. Nobody's talking about it. Tom Izzo is doing some of the best coaching that he has done in his Hall of Fame career over the last season and a third. 42-8 going into tonight's game against Nebraska. The heartbeat of this team is obviously Jeremy Fears. Fears in his last 5 games, 46 assists to 11 turnovers, an assist-to-turnover ratio of better than 4-1. Michigan State has only played 1 true road game this season. It was a road win at Penn State. The 3-point shot was the ultimate difference maker in that game for the Spartans. Divine Ugochukwu, the transfer from Miami, was 5 of 5 from distance. This is going to be a game that is going to be the type of game that you build your evening around if you're a college basketball fan. And it also gives Nebraska an opportunity to get its linchpin and its star, Rink Mass, back on track. Because the thing about Nebraska that has had obviously a nice turnaround here under Fred Hoiberg. The thing about Nebraska that has really, really stood out, in my opinion, has been Rink's Mass' ability to be a face-up five and almost a point center at the top of the key. But if you see right there, in his last two games, just 5 of 17 from the field and 0 of 7 from three-point range. But he is a critical cog for a Nebraska team, again, that is trying to get to the NCAA tournament for the second time in 3 years, and is also in a situation where it's trying to establish itself as a Big Ten contender. You look at the Big Ten right now, and you look at the top of the league. Obviously, Michigan has separated itself. Purdue is right behind. And I talked about it a little bit on a recent show on Inside College Basketball Now, which, again, you can sample all of our archives on Apple and Spotify. Purdue's being undervalued a little bit nationally because of what happened December 6th on CBS against Iowa State. I know that Purdue lost by 23 at home. But this is something that coaches in doing this 20 years have always told me. When you bring a group of guys back that have went far in the NCAA tournament, and they know that they are going to be defined by what happens in the NCAA tournament, it is a major challenge to keep them engaged throughout the course of the season. I'm not saying Purdue's players are not engaged, but that is a major thing that coaching staff is dealing with every single day. After that, you've got Illinois and Michigan State, and then you obviously have Nebraska, UCLA, Iowa. Those two teams will play tomorrow in Iowa City. But for tonight, it is a heavyweight matchup at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Nebraska against Michigan State. And just a reminder, if Nebraska makes the NCAA tournament in 2026 and wins an NCAA tournament game for the first time in program history, before the start of next season, I am flying to Lincoln. I'm putting my credit card down at an establishment in the Haymarket District, and I am throwing a happy hour for the Nebraska fans who deserve it, who are always selling out Pinnacle Bank Arena. Now, one thing, in addition to Nebraska, that is off to an incredible start this year is the production we have at the power forward position. The power forwards this year in college basketball have been ridiculous. Who are the top 5 power forwards in the sport? We will break that down when we return. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. We want to get up to 300 likes on the show. And also a programming reminder, even though we're coming to you today here on CBS Sports Network, which will continue throughout the rest of the 25-26 college basketball season, we will also be coming to you with live shows at 1 o'clock Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the rest of the 25-26 college basketball season. And if you can't get with us then live, be sure to check us out either in the morning or on your afternoon commute on Apple and Spotify. Again, we need an army with us here on Inside College Basketball Now. We want you to be a part of that army. Also, in addition to the live shows on Mondays and Thursdays, we will be bringing you additional episodes with some of the biggest and best names in the sport with exclusive interviews, so you want to stay tuned to that as well. Now, in the latter part of each week on this show, I rank a different category of college basketball. And as I was mentioning before the break, the power forward spot this year in the sport is second to none. So without further ado, I'm going to now rank the top 5 power forwards in college basketball. And obviously, we are going to go from top to bottom right there. Cam Boozer is in the one spot for obvious reasons. He's doing everything except sell popcorn for Duke this season, getting just about 23 and a half points a game, 10 boards, 4 assists. Yaxel Lendeborg is in the 2 spot ahead of Caleb Wilson only because I am somebody who values winning that much more if it's a close call. Lendeborg also not having as much usage and minutes as the players on this list, but Yaxel Lendeborg, obviously the heartbeat of that Michigan operation, playing like a first-team All-American. You've heard me wax poetically about Caleb Wilson. Look at the numbers right there for the North Carolina freshman, just about 20 points and 11 rebounds a game. He also had 6 assists earlier in the week against Florida State in the ACC opener for both teams. Iowa State's Joshua Jefferson putting up big numbers for the Cyclones, who again also are trending right now and tracking to being a potential 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. 18-7-5 for the versatile point forward. Iowa State opening Big 12 play tonight against West Virginia at Hilton Coliseum. And then JT Toppin, the reigning Big 12 player of the year, putting up ridiculous numbers, 24, 10. Obviously, somebody who was a first-team All-American a year ago. And even beyond this list, there is a player like Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's leading Purdue in scoring and rebounding, was an All-American last year. He's knocking at the door. There's plenty of other great power forwards in the country. Alex Caravan from UConn having a great season for the Huskies. Tyler Bilodeau at UCLA putting up ridiculous offensive numbers. So this position has been ridiculous for the sport. More great performances are on the way. More little nuggets are obviously on the way. And we are going to go through all of them with a fine-tooth comb. Some news and notes from around the world of college basketball when we return, and also a breakdown and preview of the great slate of games we have ahead this weekend. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Again, want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 300 likes for each and every show. And a programming note, on Mondays and Thursdays during the 25-26 college basketball season, we'll be bringing you live shows at 1 o'clock Eastern, live on YouTube. And if you can't catch those, catch us either before or after during your commute or during your workout or walk on Apple and Spotify. And in addition to those shows, we'll be bringing you great episodes separate from that during the week with exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. But we want to continue to set the table for the great weekend ahead in college basketball. But first, a couple of nuggets. Nugget number one, renewed Reneau. I'm talking about Miami's Malik Reneau. This guy has been a revelation for the Hurricanes in year one under Jay Lucas, and he's averaging career highs in points, rebounds, assists, field goal percentage, and also three-point field goal percentage. Malik Reneau playing right now like a player that's going to be an all-ACC first-team caliber candidate. He has been a revelation for the Hurricanes. Nugget number two, a must-win in Austin. It has been a tough start to Sean Miller's beginning and first year in Texas. The Longhorns have struggled in parts of the games during the non-conference schedule. He called out his team after their last game, and Texas has about as important a game as you can have for your first conference game on Saturday in Austin against Mississippi State. Texas right now is 9-4, and that's obviously a non-conference schedule that has included games against Duke and UConn. But Texas is 9-4 and will play Mississippi State, which has one of the best scorers in the SEC in Josh Hubbard on Saturday afternoon in Austin. If Texas were not to win that game, it would take a 9-5 record into back-to-back road games against Tennessee and Alabama. And then after that, on the back end, the Longhorns are going to have to host undefeated Vanderbilt. So Saturday's game against Mississippi State is about as important of an SEC opener as Texas could have in year one under Sean Miller. Then nugget number three, as we see the game preview there for Mississippi State and Texas. Texas averaging just under 88 points a game. But I want to get to nugget number 3, and that's related to MJ's magic. I'm talking about Utah State's MJ Collins, who to me is the early favorite to be the Mountain West Player of the Year. Utah State looking for another NCAA tournament berth under Jared Calhoun. MJ Collins this year has already made 32 three-point shots in the first 3 years of his college career. At Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt, Collins never made more than 30 shots from long distance. Again, MJ Collins right now, the heavy favorite to be the Mountain West Player of the Year. Let's get to some games to watch right now for the weekend in college basketball. 2 of them tonight, both games in the Big Ten. USC is at Michigan. We also have Michigan State against Nebraska at Pinnacle Bank Arena, heavyweight matchup. The big game Saturday morning, Virginia and NC State in Raleigh. A huge opportunity for NC State to get a potential quad 1 win. And then these SEC games that get going tomorrow legitimately feel like games that could be played in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Kentucky goes on the road to take on Alabama. The Crimson Tide did not have LeBaron Philon in their last game, trying to get healthy, obviously, for the start of SEC play. And then at Bud Walton Arena, John Calipari and Rick Barnes, 2 old friends who have seen it from all angles throughout their careers, will hook up in an SEC opener of major proportions. Also some under-the-radar games for you this weekend, and there's a number of them. Oklahoma State, a very good offensive team under second-year head coach Steve Lutz, will take on Texas Tech in Lubbock. Cowboys, to me, look like a team that could be a 7, 8, 9, 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. Georgia, off to a 12-1 start under Mike White, will entertain Auburn. Auburn in year 1 under Stephen Pearl has played a vicious non-conference schedule. On CBS tomorrow, A.J. DeBansa and BYU will be in the Octagon of Doom to take on Kansas State. Meanwhile, in Dallas, a game that I talked about earlier in the show, a very dangerous game for North Carolina against SMU, who has that underrated perimeter of Boopie Miller, Jaron Pierre, and B.J. Edwards. And then in Iowa City, UCLA goes on the road. This is the first part of a 2-game road trip. The Bruins will also play Wisconsin next Tuesday. UCLA will take on Iowa. This is a really fascinating guard matchup between Donovan Dent of UCLA and Bennett Sturtz at Iowa. One game that's not on that list, Kansas goes on the road in the start of Big 12 play to take on UCF. The Knights off to their best start in program history under Johnny Dawkins. Kansas trying to obviously get healthy. Bill Self has hinted that he thinks there's a strong chance that Darren Peterson could return for the Jayhawks on Saturday. Kansas is going to need their star for the entire duration of the Big 12 if Kansas is going to be in a situation where it is going to compete for a spot in the top 5 of that league. Right now, Arizona, Houston, BYU, Iowa State, Texas Tech all look like they are in firm position to be among the top 16 seeds on Selection Sunday. But you know as well as I do, this is only January. A reminder, Saturday on CBS, a big-time doubleheader. A.J. DeBansa, a player for BYU that is having a Carmelo Anthony-type freshman year statistically, will be on the road against Kansas State. And then Cam Boozer and Duke, later in the afternoon, will be on the road to take on Florida State and Luke Lauch. You want to catch those games on CBS. And a reminder that we need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we want you to be a part of that army. Each and every Monday, live shows, 1 o'clock Eastern, live on YouTube, and also additional shows throughout the week with exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. You can catch me tomorrow all day on CBS Sports Network, and I will be right here, back in the chair on Monday, getting you set to recap an incredible weekend of college basketball. I'm John Rothstein, and this was Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network.